The Parisian rain hammered against the windows of Genevieve's atelier, mirroring the tempest brewing inside her. She was late, horribly late, for the unveiling of her new collection, a collection she had poured her heart and soul into, a collection that represented her rebirth after years of playing the dutiful wife, but she couldn't move, couldn't tear her gaze away from the tableau unfolding across the street. Through the steamy glass of Le Chat Noir Café, she saw him, her husband, Antoine, the man who had promised her forever, the man whose name was synonymous with Parisian high society, the man whose legacy she had helped build, brick by excruciating brick. He was laughing, his head thrown back in a way Genevieve hadn't seen in years, not since before the endless charity galas, the suffocating expectations, the slow, insidious erosion of her own identity. And across from him, bathed in the warm glow of the cafe's interior, sat a woman, not just any woman. This one was young, vibrant, with a cascade of fiery red hair that seemed to mock Genevieve's own carefully coiffed blonde. Antoine's hand rested on hers, a possessive gesture that sent a jolt of icy dread through Genevieve's veins. He leaned in, whispering something that made the woman giggle, a sound that was like a shard of glass twisting in Genevieve's gut. For 15 years, she had been Madame Dubois, the perfect Parisian wife. She had hosted countless dinner parties, flawlessly navigated the treacherous currents of Parisian society, and dutifully produced 2 children, now teenagers consumed by their own dramas. She had suppressed her own artistic ambitions, relegating her passion for design to a mere hobby, something to fill the hours between philanthropic endeavors and school plays. She had convinced herself that this was happiness, this gilded cage of privilege and obligation. But now, staring at Antoine's hand entwined with another woman's, the carefully constructed facade crumbled, the illusion shattered, the truth, stark and brutal, slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. He was betraying her, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually. He was sharing a joy, a connection that she hadn't felt from him in years. He was alive in a way he hadn't been with her. A wave of nausea washed over her. She gripped the windowsill, her knuckles white. The rain intensified, blurring her vision. She wanted to scream, to run across the street and confront them, to rip them apart, but she couldn't. She was frozen, paralyzed by a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a deep, primal humiliation. The unveiling. Her collection. It all seemed insignificant now, trivial in the face of this monumental betrayal. Years of sacrifice, of compromise, of self-denial flashed before her eyes. Had it all been for nothing? Was she just a prop in Antoine's meticulously crafted life, a decorative accessory to be discarded when a newer, shinier model came along? A bitter laugh escaped her lips. A prop, that's all she had been. And now the show was over. Or was it? A flicker of something, anger, defiance, perhaps even hope, ignited within her. The rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of her illusions. Genevieve straightened her shoulders, her gaze hardening. She wouldn't let him break her. She wouldn't let him define her. She would rise from the ashes of this betrayal, stronger and more determined than ever before. The atelier, the collection, her art, these were hers. This was her chance. She took a deep breath, wiped away the tears that had begun to stream down her face, and turned away from the window. The unveiling awaited, and so did she. The perfect Parisian wife was dead. But Genevieve, the artist, the woman she had buried for so long, was about to be reborn. Resumo temático. Uma esposa descobre a traição do marido e, após período de sofrimento e humilhação, reconstrói sua vida e encontra a felicidade em novo relacionamento, culminando em uma rejeição final ao marido arrependido que busca reconciliação. The atelier doors swung open, revealing a whirlwind of silk, velvet, and expectant faces. Genevieve forced a smile, plastering it across her face like a mask. "Mes chéris," she announced, her voice surprisingly steady. The show must go on. The next few hours were a blur, flashes of light, the rustle of fabrics, the murmur of approval. She moved through the crowd, a phantom limb of her former self, answering questions, accepting congratulations, all the while battling the image of Antoine's hand on that woman's. After the last guest had departed, leaving behind a trail of champagne bubbles and lingering perfume, Genevieve retreated to her private studio. The silence was deafening. She sank into a velvet armchair, the weight of the day crashing down on her. Suddenly, her phone rang. Antoine. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Should she answer? What could he possibly say? With trembling fingers, she pressed the green button. "Genevieve, where are you? I've been trying to reach you all day." The unveiling. "I wanted to be there to support you." His voice was smooth, concerned, a carefully crafted performance. "I was there, Antoine," she said, her voice flat. "I saw you, supporting someone else." There was a long pause. Then, a nervous laugh. "Genevieve, darling, you must be mistaken. I was meeting with a potential investor, a very important one. Her hair was red, Antoine, very, very red, and your hand was very, very familiar with hers." The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Finally he spoke, his voice losing its polished veneer. "Genevieve, please, let me explain." "Explain what, Antoine?" "Explain how you've been lying to me for years. Explain how you've been slowly suffocating me, turning me into a shell of my former self. Explain how you think I'm stupid enough to believe your pathetic excuses." He sighed. "Genevieve, you know I love you. This was a mistake, a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Didn't mean anything? 15 years, Antoine, 15 years of my life dedicated to you, to our family, to your ambitions, and you dare tell me it didn't mean anything? Please, Genevieve, don't do this. Not now. We can work through this, we always do." "No, Antoine, we don't, and I won't. The perfect Parisian wife is dead, and Genevieve, she's just getting started." She hung up, the dial tone buzzing in her ear. Later that night, Isabelle, her closest friend and business partner, found her sketching furiously. "He called, didn't he?" Isabelle asked softly. Genevieve nodded, not looking up from her work. "He tried to lie. He always does. But I saw it, Isabelle. The emptiness in his eyes. The same emptiness I've felt for years." Isabelle placed a hand on her shoulder. "What are you going to do?" Genevieve finally looked up, her eyes blazing with a newfound determination. "I'm going to make him regret the day he ever underestimated me. I'm going to show him and the entire world what Genevieve Dubois is truly capable of." She paused, a mischievous glint in her eye. "And I'm going to do it wearing the most breathtaking dress he's ever seen." The next morning, a package arrived at the atelier. Inside, a single crimson rose accompanied by a card. "Forgive me, A." Genevieve tossed it into the trash without a second glance. The game, she realized, had just begun. The stage was set, not for reconciliation, but for a spectacular, utterly devastating performance. And she, Genevieve Dubois, was ready to take center stage. Resumo temático. Uma esposa descobre a traição do marido e, após período de sofrimento e humilhação, reconstrói sua vida e encontra a felicidade em novo relacionamento, culminando em uma rejeição final ao marido arrependido que busca reconciliação. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Genevieve threw herself into her work with a ferocity she hadn't known she possessed. Sleepless nights were spent sketching, draping, and stitching, fueled by copious amounts of strong coffee and a burning desire to prove herself. Isabelle, ever the loyal friend, shielded her from the outside world, handling the press and managing the atelier with unwavering efficiency. Antoine, meanwhile, persisted. Flowers arrived daily. Lilies, roses, orchids, each more extravagant than the last. Phone calls went unanswered. Text messages, pleading and remorseful, were deleted without being read. He even showed up at the atelier one afternoon, looking haggard and desperate, only to be turned away by Isabelle with a polite but firm, "Madame Dubois is unavailable." Genevieve refused to see him. She couldn't bear to face him, to hear his carefully constructed lies. She needed space, time to heal, to rebuild, and more importantly, she needed to focus on her revenge. A revenge that wouldn't involve shouting matches or public accusations, but something far more subtle and devastating. The whispers started, as she knew they would. Parisian society thrived on gossip, and the rumors of Antoine's infidelity and Genevieve's newfound independence were spreading like wildfire. Some pitied her, whispering about the poor, betrayed Madame Dubois. Others admired her, marveling at her resilience and her stunning new collection. And still others, the vultures of the social scene, speculated on who would be the first to capitalize on the Dubois' marital drama. One evening, Genevieve received an invitation to a prestigious gala hosted by none other than Madame Delacroix, a notorious social climber with a penchant for scandal. It was the event of the season, the kind of affair where reputations were made and broken. Isabelle advised her to decline. "It's a trap, Genevieve. They'll be waiting to see you crumble." But Genevieve smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a shiver down Isabelle's spine. "Exactly," she said. "Let them wait." The night of the gala arrived, crisp and clear. Genevieve stood before her mirror, dressed in a creation of her own design, a shimmering emerald gown that clung to her curves like liquid moonlight. It was daring, elegant, and utterly breathtaking. As she applied a touch of crimson lipstick, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The sadness was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. She was no longer the naive, subservient wife. She was a force to be reckoned with. As she entered the ballroom, all eyes turned to her. A hush fell over the crowd. She moved through the room with grace and confidence, her head held high, ignoring the whispers and the stares. She was a vision, a phoenix rising from the ashes of her past. Antoine was there, of course. He stood near the entrance, his face pale pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and regret. He tried to approach her, but she brushed past him without a word, her gaze fixed on Madame Delacroix, who was making her way towards her with a predatory smile. "Geneviève, darling," Madame Delacroix purred, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I was so sorry to hear about everything." Geneviève smiled, a cool, detached smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Madame Delacroix, your concern is touching." "Well, you know what they say," Madame Delacroix continued, her eyes gleaming with malice. "When one door closes, another one opens. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to explore new avenues." Geneviève raised an eyebrow. "Indeed, and I intend to explore them thoroughly." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the room, taking in the glittering chandeliers, the exquisitely dressed guests, and the anxious faces of those who were waiting to see her fail. "In fact," she said, her voice ringing with newfound confidence, "I have a very important announcement to make." She raised her glass, silencing the room. "I would like to thank you all for your support, especially during this challenging time. But I want to assure you that I am not broken. I am not defeated. I am, in fact, more determined than ever before." She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes locking with Antoine's. "And to that end," she continued, her voice clear and strong, "I am pleased to announce that I have accepted a partnership with Maison Moreau, the renowned fashion house in Milan. I will be relocating there next month to launch my own line." A gasp rippled through the room. Maison Moreau was one of the most prestigious fashion houses in the world. This was not just a comeback, it was a triumph. Madame Delacroix's smile faltered, Antoine's face crumpled. Geneviève raised her glass again. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice filled with a quiet power, "and to those who doubted me." She took a sip of champagne, her eyes never leaving Antoine's. The look on his face was worth more than any apology. As the crowd erupted in applause, a handsome man approached her, his eyes sparkling with admiration. "Mademoiselle Dubois," he said, his voice smooth and charming. "I am Marco Rossi, the director of Maison Moreau. We are thrilled to have you join us." He offered her his arm. "Shall we dance?" Geneviève smiled, a genuine smile this time. She placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her onto the dance floor, leaving Antoine standing alone, forgotten, in the swirling sea of Parisian society. The game, she knew, was far from over, but for now, she was winning. And the taste of victory was sweeter than she could have ever imagined. Resumo temático. Uma esposa descobre a traição do marido e, após período de sofrimento e humilhação, reconstrói sua vida e encontra a felicidade em novo relacionamento, culminando em uma rejeição final ao marido arrependido que busca reconciliação. As the music swelled, Marco guided her effortlessly across the floor. He was charming, attentive, and genuinely interested in her work, a stark contrast to Antoine's dismissive indifference over the years. They spoke of Milan, of design, of the challenges and triumphs of the fashion world. With each word, each gesture, Geneviève felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a hope for a future free from the shackles of her past. Meanwhile, Antoine watched from the sidelines, his expression a mask of wounded pride and burgeoning anger. He saw the way Marco looked at her, the easy laughter that flowed between them, the undeniable chemistry that sparked in the air. He had always taken Geneviève for granted, assuming she would always be there, a constant in his life. Now, seeing her in the arms of another man, he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Antoine cornered Geneviève as she was saying goodbye to Marco. "Geneviève, we need to talk," he said, his voice strained. "I don't think we do, Antoine," she replied, her voice cool and detached. "Please just give me a chance to explain. I can make things right. I know I can." Geneviève sighed. "Explain what, Antoine? How you managed to destroy everything we built together? How you turned me into someone I didn't even recognize? I was foolish, Geneviève. I was blind, but I've learned my lesson. I promise I'll never hurt you again." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the confident, charismatic man she had once loved, but a desperate, pathetic figure clinging to the remnants of his shattered ego. "It's too late, Antoine," she said softly. "I've moved on. I'm not that woman anymore. But what about our children? What about our family? You can't just throw everything away. Our children are grown, Antoine. They'll understand. And as for our family, well, you destroyed that long ago." He reached out to touch her, but she stepped back, her eyes flashing a warning. "Don't, Antoine. Don't make this any harder than it already is." He dropped his hand, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "So, that's it? It's really over?" "Yes, Antoine, it's over." She turned away, leaving him standing alone in the crowded ballroom. As she walked away, she felt a pang of sadness, a lingering regret for the life they had once shared. But it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of liberation, a feeling of finally being free. She had survived the betrayal, the humiliation, the heartbreak, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever before. In the weeks that followed, Geneviève focused on her move to Milan Milan. She finalized the details of her partnership with Maison Moreau, secured a stunning apartment overlooking the Duomo, and began assembling her team. She was leaving behind a life of privilege and comfort, but she was also embracing a future filled with endless possibilities. Antoine continued to call, to text, to send flowers. He even wrote her a letter, a rambling, emotional plea for forgiveness. But Genevieve remained steadfast. She had made her decision and she wasn't going to waver. One day, as she was packing her belongings, she received a visit from her daughter, Sophie. Sophie had always been close to her mother, and she had been deeply affected by the news of Antoine's infidelity. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Sophie asked, her voice filled with concern. "Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" Genevieve smiled and took her daughter's hand. "Yes, darling, I'm sure. I need this. I need to find myself again, and I can't do that here, in the shadow of Antoine's world." "But Dad is so miserable," Sophie said. "He misses you terribly. He said he doesn't know what he's going to do without you." Genevieve sighed. "I know, sweetheart, but sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. Your father made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences." Sophie nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I understand, Mom. I just don't want to see you both so unhappy." Genevieve hugged her daughter tightly. "We'll be okay, Sophie. We'll both be okay. We just need time." The day before her departure, Genevieve received one last visitor, Antoine. He looked even more haggard and desperate than before, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes rumpled. "Genevieve, please," he begged, his voice cracking with emotion. "Don't go. I can't live without you." Genevieve looked at him, her heart aching with a mixture of pity and resentment. "Yes, you can, Antoine. You'll find a way. You always do. But I love you, Genevieve. I've always loved you." "Then why did you hurt me, Antoine? Why did you betray me?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. He knew that he had no excuse, no justification for his actions. Genevieve took a deep breath. "Goodbye, Antoine," she said softly. "I wish you all the best." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the doorway, a broken man. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Genevieve looked back at her old life one last time. She saw the grand Parisian apartment, the familiar streets, the ghosts of her past. And then she turned her gaze towards the future, towards the bright lights of Milan, towards the promise of a new beginning. The flight to Milan was long and uneventful. Genevieve spent the time reflecting on her journey, on the pain and the loss, but also on the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself. She was no longer the perfect Parisian wife. She was Geneviève Dubois, a woman reborn, ready to conquer the world. Upon arriving in Milan, she was greeted by Marco Rossi, who whisked her away to her new apartment. It was even more stunning than she had imagined, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the city. "Welcome to Milan, Genevieve," Marco said, his eyes sparkling with warmth. "I hope you'll be very happy here." Genevieve smiled. "Thank you, Marco. I think I will be." As she settled into her new life, Genevieve threw herself into her work. She collaborated with the talented designers at Maison Moreau, creating a collection that was both innovative and elegant, a reflection of her own personal journey. She found joy in the creative process, in the camaraderie of her colleagues, and in the freedom to express herself without constraint. She also found happiness in her personal life. She began dating Marco, and their relationship blossomed into something deep and meaningful. He was kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in her happiness. He made her laugh, he made her feel beautiful, and he made her feel loved. One evening, as they were strolling through the Piazza del Duomo, Marco stopped and took her hand. "Genevieve," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I feel like I've known you my whole life. You are an incredible woman, and I can't imagine my life without you." He knelt down on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" Genevieve's eyes filled with tears. She had never expected to find love again, especially not after everything she had been through. But here she was, being proposed to by a man who truly cherished her. "Yes, Marco," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up, pulling her into a tight embrace. As they kissed, Genevieve knew that she had finally found her happily ever after. A year later, Genevieve and Marco were married in a beautiful ceremony overlooking Lake Como. It was a small, intimate affair attended by their closest friends and family. Genevieve wore a stunning white gown of her own design, and she radiated happiness. As she walked down the aisle, she saw Antoine standing at the back of the crowd. He looked older, more subdued, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and regret. He watched as she exchanged vows with Marco, and he knew that he had lost her forever. After the ceremony, as Genevieve was greeting her guests, Antoine approached her. "Genevieve," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I just wanted to say, congratulations. You look beautiful." Genevieve smiled, a polite but distant smile. "Thank you, Antoine. I'm happy for you," he said. "I hope you'll be very happy." I am. Antoine, she replied. I finally am. He hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something more, but then he simply nodded and turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Genevieve watched him go, and she felt a pang of pity for him, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of gratitude for the life she had built for herself, a life filled with love, happiness, and success. She had survived the betrayal, the humiliation, the heartbreak, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever before. She had finally found her own voice, her own path, her own happiness, and in the end, that was all that mattered. She had rebuilt her life and found happiness, culminating in a final rejection of her remorseful husband. The wheel had turned completely.